Throw a pebble in a pool and you'll see ripples spreading out until their power is diminished. So it's been with the pandemic. The immediate crisis of seriously ill people and the dying. The sick who show signs of recovery gradually. Then the ripples that thrust millions into poverty, unemployment, and the struggle to feed families. The elderly in care homes. People unable to access medical help for long-term conditions because of the crisis hitting the NHS. The anxiety, stress and depression affecting school children and those who live alone. The list seems endless as the ripples from one little virus cell continue their journey through populations around the world. A number of my family members got the virus, but they've all recovered, thankfully. I was lucky enough to avoid it, but living alone there was the issue of isolation. You find ways to cope. My main one, especially during the heavy lockdowns, was to visit Compton Verney regularly. Compton Verney is a mansion house that now houses an impressive art gallery and exhibits special collections throughout the year, as well as hosting numerous events in the house and in the 120 acres of grounds and meadows. Although there'd been a manor house there since the 1400s, the present house was built in 1714 and it's a Grade 1 listed building. It was extended some years later, then remodelled with redesigned interiors by John Adam. And sometime after that, Capability Brown took charge of the landscaping and the lake, which is designed to resemble a river flowing through the grounds. It stayed in the Verney family from 1442 until 1921, when it was sold to a soap magnate. It then went through a series of changes of ownership, including being requisitioned by the army for the duration of the Second World War, after which it became empty. It remained that way until 1993, when, pretty much derelict, it was bought for development by the Peter Moores Foundation. The aim was to create a gallery that would have a permanent collection and could host international exhibitions and other events. The galleries are wonderful, and Compton Verney is well worth a visit. Added to that is a very pleasant cafe, and I've become a regular visitor. During the worst periods of lockdown, the house was of course closed, but the grounds remained open. A small caravan selling coffees, teas, cakes, snacks was placed in the car park. Suddenly there was somewhere to walk, to spend time amongst the trees, to have some distance from the ravages of the pandemic, to sit by the lake, an oasis of peace. It was a place to exercise and a place to sit and contemplate, even draw rather badly. Somewhere to read, somewhere to see other people, albeit at a distance. Dog walkers visited, parents brought their young children. It was never crowded, obviously, but neither was it entirely isolated. Even in this life-threatening crisis, there's life striving to continue as normal. One all too brief moment of joy during this isolation was reuniting with some old friends. Many years ago I'd been in a band with 4 wonderful people, all very talented musicians. Inevitably we'd lost touch for quite a long while, but through the limitless reach of the internet we'd reignited our connections and we were chatting, sharing what we were up to. In November 2020 we had the idea of getting together using the power of Zoom to attempt to sing together one more time after all those years. Others were doing it, we saw them every time we turned on Facebook, so why not us? We began inevitably with the job of musical arrangement taken up by Brian. Most of our online meetings were taken up with gossip and reminiscing. There was a lot of laughter and joking. The highlight was a lengthy conversation the weekend before Christmas, sharing stories of the craziness and the fun. I hadn't laughed so much in a long time. Rehearsals took a back seat, and it was a chaotic, joyful weekend. Then Monday, we received the news that Roy had died. It was devastating. He had long-term health issues that he dealt with in his typical matter-of-fact way, and he desperately wanted us to make this recording. Back in the day when we were in our band, he'd played bass and sang. He'd also been the heart of the band. To know him was to love him and laugh, and feel good about being together. We were in shock. There was silence, and there was mourning. And then there was a new plan. To carry on, make that damned recording, for Roy and for the memories that he cherished, possibly more than any of us. Don't give that sorry look. Don't expect a story bookend. Our game ran out of time. We left it all until after Christmas. There were other things to do, and then we started again on that recording, but not for long. Mal, our drummer, went silent. He too had long-term health issues, and we waited patiently. Thankfully, he was back and in touch. He'd been unwell, but he was feeling okay now. We could return to our task. He didn't look well. And silence again. And he was gone. I was numb. After the band all those years ago, Mal and I had formed a duo. It was fun, exciting. In those recent months we'd chatted again. I learned he'd bought his girls a piano when they were young. He'd studied it up to grade 9. This was a man who was always reticent about his own musical abilities. He was an incredibly talented singer too. We'd been friends all those years ago, and time just took over, and we drifted apart. I went to Compton Verney, wandering around, knowing I was avoiding thinking about Mal and Roy. Then I sat by the lake and listened to those songs we did. I listened in my head. I wanted to hear our versions, not the versions of the original recording artists. I began to sing, sitting there by the lake, and I managed to get through 2 lines before I cried. No wishing for what's been and gone. We're all out of time. The 3 of us who remained talked about pressing on for a short while, and then we went silent. The heart had gone out of it, and the idea just faded away into oblivion. But I've come to realise that it doesn't matter. What matters is that we got back together to talk and to laugh and to remember. And the 3 that are left, well, we still talk and we still laugh and occasionally remember. It was a time when we celebrated our brief shining moment. Compton Verney played its part. It gave me a space that the 5 of us had never shared yet, where I had taken them in my thoughts. And so, in my imagination, we sang amongst the trees, we sang on the banks of the lake, we sang in the meadow, looking back down on the house. And when the house opened up, we sang in the hallway, because the acoustics were great. I visited Compton Verney and stood at the edge of some trees, looking at the lake, and thought of Roy. He'd lived in Canada for 50 years. From time to time, he had said in recent years, "When are your travels bringing you this way?" I said, "Yeah, I'll get there one day." But I never did. I stood and remembered the funny moments back then, the moments when he adopted his big brother stance and loved him for it, but never told him. I'm telling you now, Roy. I'm telling you now.